Welcome back to Overlord Anime Review, episode number 21. This is reviewing the 52nd episode of the series, The Witch of the Fallen Kingdom. And it also happens to be the final episode of season 4, the 13th episode. Yeah, this was predictable. This was going to be the final episode, given the fact the previous 3 seasons had this much, so not surprising here. Now, one thing I did notice though about this episode is that it did that from a good chunk of the book. It didn't exactly finish adapting the book per se. As a matter of fact, it didn't adapt the last few pages, which I thought that was kind of weird. But pretty much everything presented in the episode is mostly out of order from presented in the book. Let's start with now the first thing that we pick up with was basically Aura basically attacking the Wizards Guild. That actually happened a little bit later. Yes. Not sure why, but they did. So, excuse me. So, basically, they go to the Wizards Guild. By the way, that character, if you watch the opening house sequence, this guy who pulls out 2 swords. Yeah, he's actually in the episode. And he gets killed one shot pretty easily. And if you're curious, did that happen in the book too? When Aura basically thought this guy was boring here, magic item? As a matter of fact, yes. That's exactly what happened here. So, pretty much in the way, they kept the scene intact. It's brief. There's a couple scenes with Mare where he is basically debating about destroying a building. And another one, I think this is Anna Ridding, I don't remember this happened in the book, where he runs into Climb. Yes, Climb. And there's a clever editing here where Madhouse simply pulls clips from the second season of the show. Yes, they pull out some stock footage where, like, what happened in the first season show, second season show, where Demiurge is ordering everybody not to kill this one person, and Shaltier sees this person, and the person she sees is Climb, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to that. So, in the case of basically, what about Albedo? Albedo doesn't do much anything until halfway through the episode. She pops up for 2 scenes this whole episode. Actually, more like 3 scenes. And mostly have her do a lot of talking. So, in the case of Climb, now, in case you're curious though, they do show a good chunk of the palace this episode. Matter of fact, the episode opens with Climb inside the palace. Now, fun fact in the story itself, Climb is one of the 3 people left in the entire palace, because the king ordered everybody to be relieved of positions and leave the building. So, we technically have 3 people here. Just Climb, Princess Renair, and our father, the king. That's it. They're the only ones there. So, and she comes over after basically, and of course they go and see her father, which of course hands over some items possibly because the kingdom's lost the war. So she recommends Climb to take these things over to the warehouse suggested by Zenek, which he does, and takes a special route. By the way, they do add in here where he even offers basically the same request that, well, that Brain offered in the previous season, where Climb can marry Renair. The king offers it here, and Climb declines. And I'm like, yeah, in case you're curious though, why would he turn down marrying Princess Renair, a very beautiful woman? A woman he spent a lot of time with, and you could assume he could have developed an attraction to her given how beautiful she is. But, from the context of the anime, there's no reason for him to turn down this proposal. I mean, the king is offering his blessing a possible marriage between Climb and Renair, and he turns it down. Not really sure why, though it could be because they do bring up in the book, and they've kept this in the anime too, where Climb only obeys Renair's orders. That's a line pulled directly from the book, and good job in the anime keeping. Yeah, one thing I always got to give high praise for this episode, they keep a lot of the really important lines from the book. The line where, like I said, the Renair saying Climb only obeys her orders, that is pulled directly from the novel. Yes, so then he goes out, drops stuff, runs the Mare, and then that leaves us stock footage from season 2, And basically, the request that this one person can be killed was, in fact, Klein all along. So, let's see. Well, then when Klein gets back to the palace, well, on the way there, he sees the capital is burning. We'll get more into that. So, Klein gets back to the palace, and he goes back to the room where Rhaenyra and the king were, and he notices a note. Come to the throne room. Now, there's actually a little bit more going on here. They actually cut out here because it's a bit more dialogue. It's very dialogue heavy, so they basically cut it out probably due to time. So basically, Klein goes to the throne room. The throne room in this season was last seen, I believe, when this arc started, and now we basically bookend it. And he goes to the throne room, and he sees Ayn sitting on the throne. We also see the king, where he's dead at the feet of his own daughter, and blood on her hands. And of course, he's convinced, both in the book and by the way, before he comes in, here's another line basically to pull directly from the book. You are the last human here. Please go in. Well, it's basically what I'm saying. That's a bit of exaggeration, but that line where he said he's the last human in the palace, that's another line from the book. Good job keeping that in, because that was important. So he goes in, of course, as he sees what he says, and then he proceeds to fight the Sorcerer King. Basically, by the way, he's actually holding Gazavstram's sword. And Ainz remembers seeing him in the events of the previous season of the show. So he fights him for a pretty good period of time. He pulls out a good move. He basically points out, though, something that the viewers have known since he first showed up. He has no talent. But he shows determination and he uses good moves. And then, of course, he kills with a grass heart. The same move he killed Gazavstram with. And while he basically is passing out, and then we hear something else. If you excuse me, wolf. That was Padmachio, the dog maid. Yes. That's who that was. Even though it was unfamiliar. Now, you know, I know who that is because I've watched the anime. In the book, they say it's unfamiliar voice. But because basically they actually had the regular voice actor who we've seen pop up in the season. Because the characters popped up like twice before this. So it makes perfect sense to hear the voice now. So I'm sure when they get a chance to dub episode, I did check. They have dubbed episode 11, which I did review that a couple weeks ago. So when they dub this episode, I'm sure Jamie's going to be brought in for this one line, and that's it. So he wakes up, and he looks over to his left, and he sees Rhaenyra dressed in black. Which, by the way, that's her attire. Yes. From what I've read, basically, she is turned into an imp. They say she's turned into a demon, but according to Wikipedia, she was turned into an imp. That's simply put what it is, and she basically serves Albedo. Now, Klein, for some reason, is in a bed. Now, if you're curious, the book describes a very luxurious, or the most luxurious room he's ever seen. Now, the way the anime presents this, it's mostly accurate per se, but they really explain why they can't show what his outfit looks like. Does he still have his armor on that he basically is wearing the whole series? In actuality, no, they don't show it at all. They just show his head. He also apparently can't speak very well, but he does get turned into a demon. And of course, Rhaenyra excuses herself, and then she bows before Albedo. It's a slight wording change from the book itself, where she was tardy. In the book, in the anime, she's latest, which that's fine. I don't mind that change. Where she basically gives her thanks, and then pretty much after this, then we see her singing and dancing to herself, and she's gone freaking nuts. And she talks about how she's basically going to take his first time. So basically, what Rhaenyra really wants to do with Klein is to have sex with him. She's that desperate to have sex with Klein. Now, the book cuts to something else, which the end of the episode that's what the ending cuts to right after this one. The anime cuts to Philip. Remember him, the guy who was last seen at the start of this arc, where he's now. There's actually a lot more going on here. They cut completely out. It's basically very brief. In the book, it's like 3 or 4 pages a scene, where you have Philip drunk, where he goes to visit Alberto. He goes, sees a room with a light on, and there's Alberto in her regular attire. Now, as far as I can tell, this is the first these two have seen each other since episode 2 of this very season. And the scene is very brief. Now, there's also her basically dragging him along because he's drunk. In the anime, it's very straight to the point. She's very upset the fact she saw his name, and she like has a little very creepy smile that she's about to eat him. And like, oh, I have a present for you. And in the box, there are 3 heads. And it's, oh yeah, mentioned that your father suffered the same thing, and then we cut to the outside of his mansion, and it's covered in blood. Yes, and in case you're curious though, was that anime original? Yes, it was, because they don't mention a cutaway to the outside of the frickin' mansion where it's covered in blood. Not like the whole thing, like scratch marks all over the damn place. They'll basically do this while he was free. While basically Philip was getting drunk, possibly, and then like right after this, then we see like sort of like the epilogue of the episode where we see, for the first time this entire season, Marquis Raven. A character who's not been seen since the end of the previous season's show. He's been mentioned a few times. Now, the scene itself is very heavily trimmed down. There's lots of dialogue from the nobles there that they cut out. They kept Marquis Raven's dialogue all completely intact, whereas like the capital. And then we see that they walk straight to Ainz. In the book, that other nobles basically commenting on basically the structure you're seeing. Excuse me. So, Ainz gives a lowdown that everything's normal for now until we settle things up. And there's actually more here where Marquis puts some proposals to Ainz, but he suggests passing to Alberto, and Alberto basically will consider them. Now, that's cut from the anime for some strange reason, and then, of course, the episode ends, like, right there. In the book, basically, what happens next, right after that, where you see the episode end, and by the way, the thing is, the end begins. That's how the episode, that's the last thing you see before you get to the credits. Now, in the case of what happens next, now, Ainz does order that the palace be kept in pristine condition and all of its contents transferred to Rantel. Yes, and then we have him go back to his bed, sleep there for a bit, and then get up. That's how the book ended. The anime does not keep this in. If you're curious, how far in the epilogue does the thing go? You might ask. Well, in case you're curious, the Philip scene is actually handled in the book. That's after the scene with Marquis Raven. Which, oh yeah, there's also a maid in the scene, which they actually cut out. Because the whole scene is like very brief. And so you could say for the epilogue, they adapted all but the last like 3.5 pages. But I'd say they kept enough in. You could probably say that Madhouse should have extended this episode because it was the final episode season. Like, you could say this episode could at least be given at least about 3 or 4 more minutes of screen time over the end of it there, because there was still more story here. But I appreciate what the episode did. They kept a lot of really important stuff in. And a lot of stuff that I can definitely see rereading it from the book and see how presented in the anime. I can see why it was cut. Time. Because, well, the writer liked dragging out stuff for certain minor points. By having characters who don't have names, just basically have just dialogue to just stretch out the scene a little bit more than it should be. And I appreciate what Madhouse did with this episode. It's good. I thoroughly enjoy it. Like, aside from the dialogue, nothing major is cut here. All the important lines are kept. all the characters who have lines are kept in the episode. Well, they do cut out a character, but I think that's basically minor at best. Because in the book, it's like him interact. He felt like to me before he interacted with Albedo. Here in the episode, just Philip drinking from wine, but which they don't mention in the anime. That was actually a gift from Hilma, one of the Eight Fingers. So, but by the way, the Eight Fingers do make a brief appearance this season. But that's pretty much the episode in a nutshell. It's a damn good episode, and I can't wait for basically the two-part movie coming out next year. Now, I'll be discussing my final thoughts in the next video of this whole season. In the next video, okay? So, see you next video. Bye.